Welcome back to Star Narratives, the podcast. This is accessible and relatable astrology that teaches you how to support your emotional health using the wisdom of the zodiac. I'm your host, Natha Campanella. Hello and welcome to Cancer season. So a little bit of background about Cancer. Cancer is a cardinal water sign. Cardinal references beginnings. When you have a lot of cardinal energy in your chart, and by the way, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And all of those are the signs that show up. The sun slips into those signs when we enter officially a new season. So the summer solstice, for example, in the Northern Hemisphere is on the day that the sun moves into Cancer. And the winter solstice is when the sun moves into Capricorn. And Aries, of course, is the official beginning of spring. And Libra is the official beginning of fall. So cardinal energy is the initiator. It leads the way. It is new and fresh. If you have a lot of cardinal activity in your chart, you are probably a natural leader, probably have very strong opinions and ideas and ways of innovating. Cardinal signs aren't the best at finishing projects, but they are certainly good at initiating them. And so Cancer is the cardinal water sign, and the water element is related astrologically to our emotions, the ways that we interpret the world through the lens of our emotions. And anytime that we're talking about water, there is this sense of undependability. You never really know what you're going to get with water. And the same is true for our emotions. Emotions are watery in nature. They flow. They come, they go. Sometimes they're strong. Sometimes they're absent. They change very quickly. And they change on circumstance. And sometimes they stay around forever. Sometimes we get really hooked into a certain emotion, and we can just activate that emotion anytime we think about it, anytime we think about a situation. And so that brings me to the topic of Cancer as a water sign. The other water signs are Pisces and Scorpio, and each of the water signs has a different feel. We're talking about emotions, but they each have a different approach. And you can listen to the Pisces episode. The Scorpio one is not out yet. It will be when the sun moves into Scorpio. But I suggest, if you're interested in this watery element, to listen to the Pisces episode, which was in, I believe, March, maybe late February. So Cancer, as a water sign, is about privacy, our private emotions. Now, Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon, of course, is representative of the way that we approach emotions. And in my membership, I do have a moon sign teaching where I go through all of the different moon signs. So it would be valuable for you, even as you're listening to this, to either pull out your natal chart if you have a copy of it, or go and generate a chart. You can go to astro.com. You can just Google free natal chart and look at your moon sign, because the moon sign will tell you a lot about how you relate to the world emotionally. And of course, every moon sign has the element of Cancer in it. Even if your moon sign is in a different, if the moon was in a different sign when you were born, you're still going to have that Cancerian feel. And so Cancer is about our deep private emotions. the things that we sometimes, aren't willing to share. And sometimes we're not even aware of our emotions ourselves because there's such a sense of privacy that goes along with our Cancerian emotions. So Cancer also belongs traditionally in the fourth house. Fourth house is the house of home, of family, of safety, ancestry, lineage. So when the sun is in the sign of Cancer, this is a really opportune time to look at some of your potential ancestral work. I did a podcast episode with Raven Rose, and we talked about that idea of working with your ancestors as a way to get a lot of insight into some of the shadow aspects of your personality, of your psyche, of your DNA. And so this is a great month to do that because the fourth house is it's a big archetype. It's about home and family and safety, but it's like, who were we? Who else is a part of our situation? What is in our DNA? What is in our bodies that may not belong to us? We might not have the memories or the experiences or associations, and yet we still have the maybe traumatic reaction. So this is a good month to do some of that kind of introspection, as well as really looking at your deeply held emotions. So when I'm talking about the concept of feeling safe that comes along with the moon, we want emotional security. And many of us don't know how to get it, or we didn't feel it growing up. And so it is important as we're working with this Cancerian moon fourth house energy that we begin to really allow ourselves to touch in with what do we need in order to feel emotionally secure in our lives. And of course, that is a big question. And it probably touches on many different things. And you don't need to get all of the answers immediately, but it's worth thinking about. What is missing in my life that keeps me from feeling emotionally secure? Now, Cancer as a sign is very associated with the mother. And so that talks about the ways that we were mothered, especially emotionally, the messaging that we got, the validation that we did get or did not get from our mothers. It also talks about the way that we mother others. And mothering can show up in any way. You can mother your plants, you can mother your children, your pets, your partners, your friends, your clients, your neighbors. It sort of depends on how it shows up for you. And when I say mothering, what I'm talking about is this sort of natural tenderness, this natural urge to nurture that we all have, regardless of gender. We all have within us parts that want to show love, that want to be affectionate, and that are somewhat domestic, right? That show up and say, I want to care for you. I want to tend to your needs. And I want to make sure that you feel emotionally secure. And we have places within us where we want people to do that for us. And it gets tricky, as it does with all the water signs. The thing that happens that I see the most often with the sign of Cancer is that, the cardinal signs are leaders. And leaders don't like to give up the power. And each of the cardinal signs, they demand power in a different way. Cancer gets power in a sort of backdoor way. Because what Cancer does, and we all have Cancer in our chart, remember. So this shows up for us in different ways. Now, some of us have more Cancer than others. And this is true also, if you have a strong moon in your chart, if you have a lot of planets in the fourth house. So this archetype shows up in a few different ways. But the deal is that, there's this idea that I will show up and I will care for you and I will meet your needs and I will make sure that you have what you need. But here's what I expect in return. So if you have Cancer friends, or if if you have Cancer in your chart, you've probably seen this phenomenon. When a Cancer gets their feelings hurt, then those claws come out. So, one of the flip sides of all of that tender, nurturing energy is that there is a moodiness, a demandingness, easily hurt. And I think that when we're talking about the mother archetype, that all of us can relate in some respect to this idea of the quote unquote mother withdrawing and becoming rejecting and cold because you didn't meet her needs in some way. And so this is what we do when we're operating from our Cancerian nature and things go pear-shaped, is that then we get our feelings hurt and we retreat into our proverbial shell only to come out to pinch, right? And sometimes that can be nasty words, that can be pouting, that can be guilt trips, etc. And that is how Cancer controls. Cancer says, I give you this and I respect that and I expect this in return. And if I don't get it, then I will punish you. Usually by being cold and withdrawn. So these are things to really keep an eye on. And the reason for that is that with Cancer, we can fall into this trap of mothering, right? And the mothering trap, of course, revolves around giving, but not getting our own needs met in the process. So this is that mother that is always there, showing up, doing all the things, providing the nourishment and the emotional support and, keeping the house tidy and neat. And at the end of the day, just being completely depleted because she's not taking care of her own needs. And this shows up as one of the directives of this Cancer energy is that we ultimately need to learn how to mother ourselves. And I talk a lot about this idea of mothering ourselves in my Taurus episode, because Taurus is also related to this idea of self-care. Although Taurus is a little bit more related to the physical self-care, whereas Cancer is related to our emotional self-care. So that's a good question to ask yourself as you're listening to this. If you notice that with certain people in your life that you feel resentful, that you feel like you want to withhold from them or you want to reject them in some way, look at whether you are overextending yourself, whether you are giving too much and then refusing to receive in return. And I say this to clients a lot, right? So here's what happens, is that with Cancer, we want to remain in control. And so we actually refuse to receive, even when people are trying to give back to us. And the reason that we would, and this is unconscious, but the reason that we would refuse to receive is because what if what they're trying to give comes with strings? I don't want to have strings attached. And I also want to remain in a position of power. And if I'm doing all the giving, then they are beholden to me. And of course, as we know, that doesn't work out very well, because if we are not communicating about what we need, we're just expecting somebody to give back to us, then we're usually disappointed. So another question for you as you're listening to this episode, or something to journal on later, is where or with whom do I give to get? Who do I give to get with? And what I mean by that is I'm giving you something and I expect something in return. So when we're talking about the realm of emotions, right? Especially Cancerian emotions, we're talking about this vulnerability that shows up. Cancer is, like I said, it's connected to the home, the safe place to retreat. So there is a natural sense of vulnerability that shows up with Cancer. And we need a safe place to be in order to really feel like I can let it out. I can be who I am. I can allow myself to be soft and sensitive, because that is very much part of that Cancer nature, is the softness and the sensitivity. But there's this need that we all really have to feel what's there, right? Like to acknowledge that the feelings are there. The good feelings and the bad feelings, the hard feelings. And sometimes we allow ourselves to get totally distracted from those feelings. And that is something else to look for, right? Is this, when we're talking about the stress responses, we've all heard of fight, flight, or flee. Oh no, that's not it. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And the fourth one that I always like is fawn. And so fawning is very Cancer in nature. It's where you slip into that codependency, where you take the focus off of you and what you're feeling, because you don't want to feel it, and you focus it on somebody else. So we see this a lot in mothering. And, like I said, this is not gender specific. Any gender can be, has a mothering element. So this idea that we're focusing so much on the problems of our children or our animals or our garden, that we are not looking at ourselves. We're not looking at how we feel. We're just fawning over the people in our lives. Oh, cluck, cluck, cluck. Isn't that terrible? What can I do for you? How can I solve your problem? Distraction from what you're feeling. Distraction from what's really there. And so part of working with Cancer means that we have to sort of step into this place of vulnerability, of saying, I want to see what is happening in my heart, in my tender, sensitive heart. And I want to be with what I'm really feeling. Because with all of the water signs, there's this intuitive, this natural sort of psychic, intuitive element to it. But it can get blocked when we're focusing outward, when we're ignoring what we're feeling and we're ignoring what's inside. And the more that we can become aware of the things that are there, the things that scare us, that we don't want to feel: grief, sadness, anger, resentment. The more that we allow ourselves to really be with those feelings, the more that they can flow like water. And there's also an important part of Cancer where we want to talk about the way that we feel with other people. We want to share when appropriate, when we need to. When you do this, it makes me feel like this. Or, calling a dear friend, I just need to talk, I need to process something. So in Gemini, and Gemini is the sign that precedes Cancer. And when we're looking at the zodiac, we're looking at it as if we're like sort of we're going through the hero's journey. We started Aries, and then we work our way down, and then we go back up. And Gemini comes before Cancer. And in Gemini, we're learning to communicate, learning how to express through words, through ideas, through action. And then we take what we've learned and we take it into Cancer. So then we're talking about, when I do feel something, how can I communicate about it, whether with somebody else or with self? How can I allow myself to really feel what's here so that it can move through? How can I validate my deepest, most private parts? How can I, use what I see and what I feel to develop a feeling of rightness within myself? Anytime that we're talking about family, which is, that fourth house archetype, we're always wanting to belong. We want to belong to the group. We are pack animals. And for the most part, there are places in all of our lives where we have felt like we don't belong. We don't fit in. We didn't do it right. We're not lovable enough. We're not interesting enough, whatever it is. And so we want to work to figure out how do I create a sense of belonging, regardless of what is happening outside of me? How do I create a sense of safety within myself, a foundation that I can navigate from? And so these are Cancer season questions for you. These are some thoughts that you can ponder as we're in Cancer season. All right. I will talk to you guys in a few weeks. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to work with me privately or read more about all of the numerous ways to work with me, visit my website, nathacampanella.com. I really appreciate any time that you take to leave a review of this podcast on any of the platforms that you listen on. It helps other people to find it. And of course, if you enjoy this podcast, share it widely and freely with those that you know and love. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.